somebody find me 801 Southwest 2nd? Do we have Arkansas cases back there?
We've got Southwest.
Yeah, our 33 ARC app at 37. 801 Southwest 2nd. Okay. Have you been sworn? Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now pending before the court? So help you God. Have a seat.
Okay, you'll need to speak up into that microphone if you could, and tell the jury your name.
Stacy Sanders.
Stacy Sanders. Okay. And where do you live?
West Memphis.
And how old are you, Stacy?
19.
And where did you live in May of 1993?
West Memphis.
And what was your address there in West Memphis?
505 Balfour.
And do you recall the evening of May 5th of 1993?
Yes, sir.
And on that evening, tell the jury what you did.
I was across the street at my cousin's house, and we were watching TV.
Okay. You were across the street from your cousin, or from your house at your cousin's? Is that
yes,
correct?
Sir.
Now, that was just right across the street on Balfour, is that correct?
Directly across.
Directly across?
Mm-hmm.
And who is home at your house, to your knowledge?
At my house?
Yeah.
My little sister, Jennifer.
Your little sister, Jennifer?
Mm-hmm.
And were your parents there?
No, sir.
Where were they?
They went to Splash.
To Splash? What is Splash?
It's a casino in Tunica.
Okay. And around what time did you go across the street to your cousin's?
I went over there around 6 o'clock.
Around 6 o'clock? And what did you do over there?
We were watching TV.
Do you recall what you watched?
From 6 to 6:30 we watched Family Feud, and at 7 o'clock we watched 90210.
90210?
Mm-hmm.
And is that a show that you like to watch?
Yes, sir.
And did it, are you saying that came on at 7 o'clock that evening?
Yes, sir.
And did you see anybody come to your house that evening?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury what happened and what you saw.
I was watching TV, and my cousin Meredith looked out the window and said, "Pam and Joe are at your house." And I looked out there and I seen Pam and Joe and Damien at my house.
So you saw Damien at your house?
Yes, sir.
And Pam and Joe?
Yes, sir.
And what did you do then?
I just kept watching, turned back and started watching TV.
Could you see from where you were, could you see across the street and see the driveway?
Yes, sir.
And do you have any idea how long they were there across the street at your house?
When I looked back out, it was a little bit after about 15 after 7, and they were leaving.
Okay. And when they left, who did you see leaving?
I seen 4 people in the car. I seen 4 heads. So I assumed it was Pam and Joe and Damien and his sister Michelle.
Okay. But when they went in, you didn't see Michelle?
No, I just seen Pam, Joe, and Damien.
Okay. But you did see Damien?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Damien?
Yes, sir.
And can you point him out here?
Yes, sir.
Point him out for us.
Right there.
Okay. And you're positive he was there?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know that this was May 5th of 1993?
I don't know. Because it was the first time my parents went to Splash, and it was on a Wednesday night because 90210 come on, and...
Okay. Have you been questioned about this before?
Only by Fogelman when they called me in.
Okay.
West Memphis.
And it was on that evening?
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
If I understand your testimony correctly, Stacy Sanders, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Ms. Sanders, if I understand your testimony correctly, you said you saw 3 people go in the house?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you saw 3 people come out of the house, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how frequently would the Hutchisons and their children come over to visit at your parents' house?
All the time.
Okay. When you say all the time, I mean...
If they didn't come over our house one day, we'd go over there, so we seen them every day just about.
Okay. How close a relationship, or could you describe the relationship between your family and the Hutchisons?
My parents and their parents have been close for years.
Okay. And since they had moved back to Oregon, back here from Oregon, had they come over to the house 2, 3, 4 times a week during that period?
When they first come back, they lived with us for a little while.
Okay. And prior to them moving back here, sometime when you were growing up, y'all actually lived in the same house together for practically
Yes,
a
sir.
year, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would it be fair to state that their children were kind of like brothers and sisters to you?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you talk with Mr. Fogelman, did you indicate to him that it was 2 days later after you saw this incident when Damien was arrested?
2 days later,
Yes, ma'am. Said, did you
he went
state
into
that-
question. He wasn't arrested until in June.
Okay. When you talked to him in September of this year, September 2nd, I believe, did you tell him, because I remember, I think it was 2 days later, they went again, and that's when Damien got arrested. I think that was then.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember.
And who have you talked with about the fact of what took place on May 5th? Who have you discussed it with?
Well, when I was all going around, I talked to my mom.
Okay. Anybody else?
Me and Meredith has talked about it.
Okay, and that's who is Meredith?
Meredith and my cousin.
Okay. And did
'Cause I was
y'all go back and get together and sit down and go over the facts or go over
No.
what you remember?
No, not really.
Okay. Have you talked or discussed it with anyone else?
Not really.
Okay. Have you ever talked with the private investigator, Mr. Lax, about
No.
what your statement would be?
No.
Have you talked with the defense attorneys about what your testimony would be?
They just said that I would be subpoenaed to come in and talk because he was at my house that night.
Okay.
That's all that's basically been said.
Have they ever gone over with you the facts or details of your statement?
Not really. They've asked me questions about it. I mean, not really. They didn't tell me what to say. They just asked me questions and then I answered them. And
Did the Hutchisons come over to the house on other Wednesday nights prior to that?
yeah, sure,
Did they come over to the house on other Wednesday nights after that?
sure.
Okay. And did your folks go to Splash Casino on other occasions?
Yes,
And in fact, were you present on an occasion sometime around there when Damien, Jason, and another individual came over to the house around 9 o'clock one evening when they were walking in the neighborhood?
they did that quite a few times.
Okay. So it wasn't unusual for them to come over there on a Wednesday evening? And you say they left by 7:15?
Mm-hmm.
No further questions.
Anything else? All right, you may stand down. Call your next witness.
We call Jennifer Sanders. Your Honor, just actually I forgot it on this witness, but the next witness does not want to be photographed or
All right.
filmed.
All right, no photographs or films of this witness. All right.
You need to come on around and get up on the stand.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now pending before the court, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Could you state your name, please?
Jennifer Sanders,
And how old are you, Jennifer?
12,
And where do you live?
in Turl.
In Turl?
Yes, sir.
And where did you live last May of 1993?
In West Memphis.
Okay. And who did you live with?
My parents and my sister.
Who are your parents?
Susan and Randy Sanders.
And who's your sisters?
Stacy Sanders and Cindy Sanders.
Okay. And do you recall the night of May 5th of 1993?
Yes, sir.
And tell us what happened on that evening.
I was just sitting at home about 7 o'clock. Damien, his parents and sister came over to the house to about 20 or 30 minutes.
Okay. Who was there at the house with you?
Me?
Anybody else there?
No, sir.
And where were your parents?
They went to Splash.
And what is that?
It's a gambling casino.
Okay. And was your sister at home with you?
No, sir.
Do you know where she was?
She's across the street at my aunt's.
At your aunt's?
Yes, sir.
Is that where is that in relation to your house?
It's just right across the street.
And so you were at home that evening, and what were you doing?
Watching TV.
And do you recall what you watched?
90210.
90210?
Yes, sir.
And what time does that come on?
7 o'clock.
And what... now you said some people came over to your house then?
Yes, sir.
Who came to your house?
Damien, Michelle, Pam, and Joe.
And is that Damien Echols,
Yes,
Michelle
sir.
Echols? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And Joe and Pam Hutchison?
Yes, sir.
And how long were they there at the house?
About 20 or 30 minutes.
Okay. And what did they do when they came in the house?
They just came in and asked where my mom and dad was, and I told them, and Pam wrote my mom and dad a letter to tell them that they came by, and they sat there and watched TV and talked, and they left.
Okay. Now, did you all have a phone at the time?
No, sir.
Okay. And how do you know this occurred on May 5th of 1993?
Because the night after that, I went to my boyfriend's concert, band concert.
Okay. And have you been questioned about this before?
Yes, sir.
Who questioned you about this?
Baldwin and Gitchell.
Mr. Fogelman and Mr. Gitchell?
Yes, sir.
And you talked with them about this?
Yes, sir.
And are you telling us the same thing you told them?
Yes, sir.
And you do recall this happening on May 5th?
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Jennifer, I've got a few questions for you. Now, how long have you known the Hutchisons and Damien?
Well, they was friends with my parents whenever I was born.
And how many times over the course of your 12 years have they actually lived in the same house with you?
About 3 years.
Okay. And as far as your testimony up here today, did you talk with anyone regarding the facts of what happened on the 5th? Did you discuss that with anyone?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you discuss it with Mr. Price, Damien's attorney?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you discuss it with Mr. Davidson?
No, sir. Well, this morning I told them about them coming over.
Okay. And so they discussed what your testimony was going to be?
They didn't tell me what to say or anything.
But did they discuss with you what your testimony was going to be?
Could you tell me?
Did y'all talk about the facts you were going to testify to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you discussed it with your mother?
No, sir.
You never talked about this with your mother?
No, sir.
Okay, did you ever talk about it with your sister?
No, sir.
Did you ever talk about it with any of the McKays across the street?
No, sir.
Okay. And this subject's never been mentioned between yourself and any of those three people?
No, sir.
Anybody in Damien's family that you've discussed this with?
No, sir.
Now, you remember talking with Mr. Fogelman and giving him a statement, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you said in that statement that there was, well, let me ask you this, was it unusual for Damien to come over to y'all's house?
No, sir.
Okay. Did his family come over there pretty frequently?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was before and after the murders, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you remember telling Mr. Fogelman that, in fact, right around this time period, that Damien had been over there with two of his friends around 9 o'clock one night?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And who was with him when he came over that night?
Jason and this boy named Ken.
Okay. And when you talked with Mr. Fogelman, you weren't sure what time that was, what date it was that occurred?
I don't remember.
Okay. You don't remember whether you told him a date or whether you knew when that had happened?
I don't remember.
Okay. If your statement reflects that what you told him was that you couldn't remember a date, but you thought it was before the boys were missing, would that be accurate?
I don't remember.
Okay. Let me show you. What is on page 23, Your Honor, may I approach with? This is a transcript of your statement, and the part that's highlighted in green, could you read that? The top 3 or 4 lines that's highlighted in green, could you read that?
I forgot it was on a Friday that all I remember. Well, I mean, it was in the last year, or yes. Okay, it was before or under these words. These before. Probably in about April.
Okay. You indicated to Mr. Fogelman that they had come by before the murders occurred?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you also tell him that you remembered that because that was a night that your parents were at Splash?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in fact, you told Mr. Fogelman that on this incident prior to May 5th, when the boys came over, that your parents were at Splash on that occasion?
Yes, sir.
And it was around 9 or 10 o'clock at night?
Yes, sir.
And it was Damien and Jason and who?
Ken.
And how were they dressed that night? How was Damien dressed the night those 3 boys came over?
He was dressed in all black.
Okay. Was that pretty usual for
Yes, sir.
Damien? Was there anything unusual about you watching 90210 on Wednesday night?
No, sir.
If it was on Wednesday night, you'd be watching it, right?
Yes, sir.
You indicated that one way you were certain that this was on the 5th was because your boyfriend was playing in a band, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that band played up at the hospital, is that correct?
By the hospital.
By the hospital. Okay. And what's your boyfriend's name?
Nick Garza. He's my ex-boyfriend now.
Oh, okay. And what was the name of the band that he played in, or was it a school band? Or?
It was a school band.
Would that have been the spring concert for the school band?
I think. I'm not for sure.
Okay. Pass with me.
Is there any doubt in your mind that on May 5th of 1993 that you saw Damien come to your house? That he came to your house?
He was there.
That's all.
Anything else?
And the way you remember that, Jennifer, is because the next night was when the band concert was, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, you may stand down. You're free to go. Call your next witness.
Call Randy Sanders. Call Randy Sanders.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now pending before the court? So help you God.
Could you state your name, please?
Randy Sanders.
Where do you live, Mr. Sanders?
I live in Hafer at the present time.
And what's that around?
Turl.
Okay. And where did you live on May 5th of 1993?
At 505 Balfourth in West Memphis.
Okay. And who lived there with you?
My wife and 2 daughters.
Okay. And who's your wife?
Susan Sanders.
And who are your 2 daughters?
Jennifer Sanders and Stacy Sanders.
And you all lived there on Balfour in May of 1993?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Who lived across the street from you?
Brother-in-law Ricky and Deborah McKay, Meredith McKay, and John McKay.
Okay. And when did you all move from there?
We've been going there for about a month now.
Okay. And so did you live there continuously up until the last month?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you, who did you work for last May of 1993?
Myself.
And what type of work were you involved in?
I'm an auctioneer. I own an auction.
Okay. Do you know a Mr. DeWitt?
Yes, sir.
Who is that?
It was an acquaintance of mine that I met through the auction that owned the second-hand store in West Memphis.
Second-hand store in West Memphis?
Yes, sir.
And how long have you known him?
Approximately, say 6 months, 7 months.
Did you know him back last May?
Yes, sir. That was counting back then.
So from last May, you'd known him about 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you ever go anywhere with Mr. DeWitt?
Yes, sir.
Where did you go with him?
We've gone to Splash Casino.
And how many occasions did you go with him?
One time.
One time with Mr. DeWitt?
Yes, sir.
And on that occasion that you went to Splash with Mr. DeWitt, did anybody else go with you?
My wife and his wife, Rose.
Your wife and his wife, Rose?
Yes, sir.
And when you went to Splash Casino, do you remember the date that you went?
No, sir, I don't.
Do not remember the date?
I do not remember the date.
Do you remember the day of the week that you went?
No, sir, I don't.
Would it have been on a weekend?
No, sir.
Would not have been on a weekend?
No, sir.
And tell the jury why it would not have been on a weekend.
The day that, or the night that we had went to Splash, his store was open, and he's not opened on the weekend. I have an auction sale on Sunday, and that takes up all of my day right there. By the time I'm through with it, I don't go anywhere.
Okay, so prior to going to Splash with Mr. DeWitt, were you working with him that day?
Yes, sir. He had needed some help moving some things around in the store, and he was going to buy some stoves and I often need help unloading them. So I stuck around the store that day to help him work.
Okay. Is this the only time you have gone with Mr. DeWitt to Splash?
Yes, sir.
Have you been to Splash on other occasions?
Yes, sir.
But this was the only time that you went with Mr. DeWitt?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, on this particular time, is there anything about this occasion down at Splash that you recall?
The amount of money that he lost.
The amount of money they lost?
Yeah.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
Mr. DeWitt.
Okay. And did you see anybody else that you knew there that evening?
Yes, sir.
And who was that?
It was, I can't even think of her name now. Dadgummit. She's a bit outside. Gail Poindexter.
Gail Poindexter?
Yes, sir.
Does she go by Sharp now?
Yes, sir. She had married. I always knew her as Gail Poindexter, and I still call her that.
And you recall seeing her at Splash on that evening?
Yes, sir.
Where were your children that evening?
They was at home.
But let's go back to Miss Gail Sharp or Poindexter.
Okay.
What do you remember about seeing her there that evening?
She had won $10,000 on the slot machine.
Won a big amount on the slot machine.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was she excited about that?
Yes, sir. Real excited.
Okay. And but this was was this a weekday rather than a weekend?
Yes, sir. It was a weekday.
Okay.
You know what day of the week it was?
I do not remember, sir, exactly what day of the week.
So it could have been Monday through Saturday or Monday through Friday?
Yes, sir.
Monday through which?
It could have been Monday through Saturday at least.
Okay.
So
Remember what part of the month it was?
No, sir. I'm no
Remember
good.
what month it was?
I'm no good with dates, and I don't keep up with dates.
but you do remember on this particular occasion that you saw Miss Poindexter or Miss Sharp, and she won a large amount of money.
Yes, sir.
And did something also happen with Mr. DeWitt that evening?
Yes, sir. He had used his credit card. After he run out of cash, he used his credit card quite a bit. He had left it in the machine and walked off and left it. And I remember that because we had to go back up to the office and ask them, did anyone turn it in and all. And he was lucky you got it back.
Okay. And all this happened on that same occasion?
Yes, sir.
And one more time, I kind of skipped over. Where were your children?
At home.
At home? Okay. That's all.
How many times would you figure you've been to Splash, Mr. Sanders?
Probably 3 to 4 times.
Okay. And had you gone to Splash before this particular night?
No, sir.
Okay. And so if your daughter testified that on a night prior to this that y'all were at Splash and that Damien and Jason came by the house around 9 or 10 o'clock, then that wouldn't be correct?
If she said it before then, it wouldn't be.
Now, is there, when you go down there to that place, do you sign in when you go in?
No, sir.
Okay.
Unless you have a gold card, and then everyone who's carrying a gold card signs you in.
Okay. Did Mr. DeWitt have a gold card?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you sign in and put how many guests are with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how many of y'all were together that night?
It was 4 of us.
Okay.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, you may stand down. You're free to go. Do you have any questions?
No.
You're free to go. Call your next witness.
Oh, Gail Sharp? No.
You're free to go. Call your next witness.
Oh, Gail Sharp, Your Honor?
Leona Gail Sharp.
And have you gone by any other names?
Well, a lot of my friends call me, that don't know my marriage name. Like my maiden name, Poindexter, Gail Poindexter.
Okay. So, Gail Sharp now, is that correct?
Well, Leona Gail.
Okay. Where do you live, Miss Sharp?
1208 Lancaster, West Memphis, Arkansas.
Okay, and how long have you lived there?
Oh, probably about 20 years.
Okay. How, do you know Randy and Susan Sanders?
Yes.
And how long have you known them?
I would probably say about 16 years.
You've known of them quite a long time. Okay. And have you had occasion to go to Splash Casino?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
You have to understand why I'm like,
And did you go to Splash Casino on May 5th of 1993?
Yes, I did.
And there at Splash Casino that evening, did you see Randy and Susan Sanders?
Sure I did. They walked right up to me.
And tell us what happened that evening.
I played $20 and won $10,000.
Won $10,000?
Mm-hmm.
And are you sure that that was on May 5th of 1993?
Yes, I filed it on my taxes. I didn't want to, but I did.
And how did you go back and file that on your taxes?
Like a
Why
minute.
did you do that?
Because you called and asked me if I was at Splash.
Okay. And
I had it on my W-2s that they fill out Mississippi taxes,
yes,
where they hold out money.
yes.
They give you a copy.
And you did file that?
I sure did.
And those winnings were?
$22,400 on mine.
Okay. And those, you do recall that date of May 5th of 1993?
I sure do.
I
Because
understand.
Susan walked up to me and said, "You're the one that won this?" I said, "I sure am."
Who were the Sanders? Were they there with another couple that night?
I don't know who they was.
But did you see them with another couple?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's all I'd have, Your Honor.
When did Mr. Davidson call you and get you to file your taxes?
He scared me.
When did he call you?
When he mentioned the Social Security, let's see, it was several weeks ago, a couple weeks ago.
Just a few weeks ago?
Well, I'd talked to him and then some lady called me.
Some lady called you?
Want my Social Security number, and I told her no.
All right, how many times did you talk to Mr. Davidson about this?
Twice.
Okay. And about how long ago was the first time?
I would say within the month. Well, last month.
Okay, so since February the 10th, is that what you're saying? Was it in February or January?
February.
February?
February.
All right. And when did he call you next? Or talk to you next?
Well, when the lady got on the phone and I wouldn't talk to her, then she switched it over to him.
Okay. He was there with the lady, is that what you're saying? Okay. Now, did I call you and talk to you?
What is your name?
John Fogelman.
No, you didn't.
I didn't? And you live at 1208 Lancaster?
Mm-hmm.
Have you talked to anybody in law enforcement or with the police
All the time.
in relation to this?
Oh, no. I'm a waitress is when I say that.
But you hadn't talked to anybody with law enforcement or the prosecutor's office in relation to this?
Mm-mm.
Now, no further questions at this time. I'd like to reserve the right to recall.
Do you think this will take back here, or?
I don't have any idea. I mean, the boy just came up and asked me about it.
You have anybody else?
He didn't like you asking him about the homosexual part. He didn't.
How's Robin?
Well, I don't think the boy indicated to me that he didn't have any problem answering any questions, but he wanted somebody to protect him on things like that, because he doesn't want to have to answer that. And so I told him I'd appoint my lawyer to talk to him. How long it'll take, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any problem with you asking him the other questions if he's willing. Perhaps they're through now. I see the door opening up.
Oh, Pat just went
Yes,
in.
ma'am.
Oh. Well, we'll just wait then.
Were you through?
We'll call
You got
somebody
any-
else.
Yeah, okay.
Oh.
We'll call somebody.
15-minute recess at this time. Court's in session. Wait just a minute till Jim gets through. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Excuse me.
All right, you may proceed.
Could you state your name, please?
Gary Gitchell.
Could you speak up, please?
Gary Gitchell.
Okay. And you're the same Gary Gitchell that testified earlier in this proceeding?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And what is your, where do you work?
I work for the West Memphis Police Department.
And what is your position for the West Memphis Police Department?
I'm an inspector.
And what is an inspector?
I'm over the Criminal Investigative Division.
So are you in charge of the Criminal Investigation Division?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Okay, so this particular investigation regarding these 3 homicides, were you in charge of this investigation?
Yes, sir.
And were you the person that the other officers would report to in this investigation?
Yes, sir.
And it was your responsibility to take care of this entire investigation?
Well, I had a lot of help.
Okay, thank you. Do you, in the West Memphis Police Department, do you all have a police manual that has procedures?
Yes, sir, we do.
And in this police manual, are those procedures that the police department follows in conducting their investigations?
For criminal investigations, a manual strictly for that?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
No, sir.
So there is no manual in how you will do certain things in an investigation. Is that correct?
No, sir. A step-by-step guide, is that what you're
Yes.
asking for? No, sir.
Okay. Do you have set procedures regarding the interviewing of witnesses?
No, sir, not particularly.
Okay. Is there any procedure is it your practice to tape record interviews of potential witnesses?
Some we do, some we don't.
And does the West Memphis Police Department have tape recorders?
Yes, sir, on occasions.
on occasions. Does the West Memphis Police Department also have a video camera?
Working right now, yes.
And on May 5th of 1993, isn't it true that the police department, the West Memphis Police Department, had a video camera?
We had a video camera, but as far as it's being hooked up and it working and set in a position such as an interrogation room or of that nature, no, we did not.
Okay. You did have a video camera that day, did
Yes,
you
sir.
not? Okay. So the West Memphis Police Department does own a video camera?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And were any of these interviews that you conducted in this investigation videotaped?
In this entire investigation?
Yes.
I believe there were some that were, yes, sir.
Okay. But there were some that weren't?
Right.
Now, did you ever videotape any interviews with my client, Damien Echols?
No, sir.
Did you ever tape record any of the interviews with my client, Damien Echols?
Did I personally?
Yes.
I can't recall if I did or not. I don't think I did. There may have been some other officers that did. I'm
There are
not sure.
tapes of my client?
Not. Are there any?
Are you the custodian also of the records of the West Memphis Police Department?
No, sir. I'm not the custodian of records.
Are you the person that takes care of this investigation? And are you aware of the records that have been compiled in this case?
I've lived with them for about 10 months. As far as every item in there, there's no way humanly possible I can keep up with all of it.
Did you ever, to your knowledge, did anybody ever turn on a tape recorder and push that record button when anybody talked with my client, Damien Echols?
I don't know. You'd have to ask someone else. I don't know.
Okay. Who were all the people that talked with my client?
I believe Detective Ridge did, Detective Durham. That may have been the only two that I know of that talked with him.
Would Detective Sudbury also have talked with him?
I think he talked with him out on the street one day.
Okay. Were any of those conversations, to your knowledge, recorded?
I don't know if they were or not.
Did you also talk with my client, Damien Echols?
I talked with him for a short time, yes, sir.
And did you make any notes of those conversations?
It was a very informal sitting down and talking, what he and I did.
So there are no notes of your conversation with him?
I don't recall.
And I believe you testified that you didn't record that also?
No.
Okay. Is it your procedure in the West Memphis Police Department for interviews of suspects in a crime to be taped?
No, it's not a procedure to do that.
It's not a procedure to
No,
do
sir.
that? Would you agree with me if you had done that, we would know exactly what the officer said and exactly what Damien Echols said?
Well, we've talked with several hundred people in regards to this investigation, so no, it was not possible to do a recording of everyone. It's
Okay.
just it's a manpower, a personnel trying to get everything transcribed. No, it's impossible to do. We rely a lot on our personal notes.
We'll get to transcribing here in a minute, but first of all, I want to ask you about the taping. Does it take a longer time for you to put a tape in a tape recorder and hit that button to where it would just be impossible for you to do?
No.
And these little tapes, what do they cost? About $4 for 6? Is that about right?
Let's see. You talking about cassette tapes, mini cassette tapes?
Well, what kind of recorders do you all have in the West Memphis Police
We have
Department?
mini cassette tape. We've got a large regular cassette tape also.
How much would it have cost the West Memphis Police Department to tape record conversations with my client, Damien Echols?
Wouldn't have cost much.
Wouldn't have cost much?
Mm-hmm.
Would it have cost, strike that. So are you telling us that there really aren't any procedures for tape recording interviews?
That's basically opened up to an individual investigator.
Okay.
Do I instruct them to, make them to? No.
Okay. Now, let's talk for a minute about the procedures in the West Memphis Police Department for showing a photo lineup.
Okay.
Do you have set procedures in the West Memphis Police Department for showing a photo lineup?
Basically, what we attempt to do is, it's done several different ways. On occasions, we do have it's like a vanilla folder that has got the squares cut out.
Do you have that with you here?
I don't know if it's right here. It's possibly in another vehicle that we brought all the evidence with us. I don't know if it's actually with this.
Okay. Could you get that sometime today?
Sure.
Okay. And is this like a cutout piece of mat board with
well, you didn't let me finish
squares?
on the different ways. You asked how many ways we do it.
Okay.
That's one way we do it. There is also just a mere laying out of pictures with putting a number on the front of the picture. It's done that way sometimes. So then there's also a method of using our mugshot books, which we have several hundred photographs in our mugshot books. Probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess, say 15 or 20 books that individuals also look at. So we have a lot of photographs.
Okay. Is it a procedure of the West Memphis Police Department for you to write down the names of the pictures that you show to someone in a photo lineup?
If there was an identification made, yes, we would.
If there is no identification made, do you not write down the names of the people?
It would be good to do that, and I know what you're getting at, but yes, it would be good to do that, yes.
You would agree with me that it could be exculpatory or to someone. It would be a good thing for someone that was accused of a crime to know that they weren't identified in a photo lineup, wouldn't it?
To know that they were not identified?
Yes.
I guess you'd have to explain that a little better for me.
Okay. If someone is accused of a crime and you go out and show a witness a photo lineup, that person's picture is in the photo lineup, and they do not pick anybody out, wouldn't it be important to tell this person that?
It would depend on what that photo lineup is for. Is it for identification purposes in this crime, or is it for identification purposes for another reason?
Was a photo lineup shown in this crime?
Yes, sir.
How many?
Possibly two.
Possibly two. And in those photo lineups, was my client's picture included?
Well, there's been a little debate about that. Understand, I have an officer that is trying to recall if there was one or not. I was present at the time, and I'm thinking that his picture was in that lineup. So we have a little difference.
You all didn't write it down, so you just don't remember either way. Is
right.
that correct?
I'm saying I think his picture was in it. Yes, sir.
And it is also true that his picture was not picked out, isn't it?
Well, I can answer that a simple yes or no, or be allowed some.
I'm asking you yes or no.
I figured you would. Yes, his picture was shown.
But it was not picked out.
And it was not picked out.
Okay.
Now, some explanation necessary. We'd like to be able to explain if you need to.
Okay. His picture was shown to an 8-year-old boy. This 8-year-old boy was giving us information in regards to cult activity that he states he had witnessed, and the people were described as having all blackened out faces.
But this 8-year-old boy did not pick him out, did he?
We didn't think that he would pick anyone out if their face is totally black, so we didn't expect it. It was just strictly a shot in the dark.
Okay. Now,
was anybody picked out?
Nobody was picked out, no, sir.
let me ask you a little bit about your procedure for the handling of of evidence, is there a set procedure that the West Memphis Police Department has for the handling of evidence collected in this case?
Yes, sir. Detective Ridge, for the most part, took custody of evidence and made it and prepared it to go to the crime lab. We tried to have one particular officer to take items to the crime lab to cut down on the amount of officers that would be subpoenaed to court. We are a small department, and we attempted to have as few officers involved as possible.
Could you tell us what the procedure is when someone goes out and collects evidence? What happens with the evidence at that point?
Okay, you would take that evidence. We use paper bags. Paper bags we purchase from grocery stores in town. We use those bags because they breathe. If you use a plastic bag, moisture is retained in that plastic bag, and you can damage any possible evidence that you would put into a plastic bag.
Where is it that you keep the evidence?
We would either keep it in we have a evidence vault in our detective division, or in this particular case, it was so large, I utilized an office next to my office to keep the evidence in.
Is that the closet area that adjoins your office?
Well, now we have a detective in that office, but
okay.
You're familiar with where it's at.
Okay. Now, the evidence, once it comes and is placed in the evidence locker or the closet, if it's going to be sent to the crime lab, how is that handled?
Okay, there's a form. It's an evidence submission form that belongs to the state crime lab, which we fill this form out. We attach it to the bag. Of course, when you pick a piece of evidence up, you write down, what type of. If you give me a bag, I can show you. Okay, in this case, this one's marked E78, a black T-shirt from Damien Echols, date 6/3 of 93, the officer's initials, the case file number on it. Then it has subsequent markings on it, which we did not apply, but when evidence goes to the crime lab, that is done on it, and the different people that handle it may put this on it.
Okay, thank you. Did Officer or Detective Ridge bring you evidence collected at the Bojangles restaurant?
Bring me?
Yes.
No, sir.
To your knowledge, was an evidence submission sheet that you just talked about ever completed sending anything to the Arkansas Crime Lab from evidence collected at the Bojangles restaurant?
As far as I know, no, sir. It was never a form filled out. I believe what you're in question about, you've seen my office. You're familiar with my office with the one table there. During this case, that table was full of different papers, documents, basically all throughout that office.
When did you discover that the Bojangles blood evidence had been lost?
I believe it was when it came up in Corning.
Okay. And that's the first that you knew that this evidence had been lost?
Yes, sir.
Were you awaiting that evidence to come back from the crime lab?
No, sir. It was, as the term is, lost.
Okay. Now, so as far as your procedures for collecting that, in this case, it was to bring it in and put it on the table in your office.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let me ask you a little bit about the procedures of the West Memphis Police Department for audio and video surveillance. In this case, First of all, do you have a set procedure for audio and video surveillance?
Yes, sir.
And what is that procedure?
We would get permission from the individual if we were in someone's home, or we would get a permission from that person in order to do that.
And did you have audio and video surveillance in this particular case?
Yes, sir.
And where was that audio surveillance?
We did one at Vicki Hutchison's residence, and then we also set out on the skating rink parking lot in West Memphis and did a surveillance of that also.
And tell us what kind of equipment that you used there with the audio surveillance at Vicki Hutchison's house.
Okay, what we have is a transmitting device which was connected to a outdoor repeater, and the signal would be transmitted with that repeater and could be received by us with walkie-talkies and also a recording device.
And so you had a recording device, a transmitter, and receivers.
Right.
Were one of those receivers in your office?
No, not my office.
Not in your office? At the police station?
At the police station. Well, there's several radios that we have, walkie-talkie radios with that channel affixed in the radio that you can receive that particular frequency on.
And that, so you had equipment where it would be placed in a home and you could listen in at the police station.
Right. Depending on a lot of factors, but we were able to, yes, sir.
Did you, first of all, was Vicki Hutchison working for the West Memphis Police Department in this investigation?
Initially, no, she was not. We were not even aware of her.
Did she work with the West Memphis Police Department in this investigation?
You say with or for?
I'm saying with.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Vicki Hutchison, is she the person that you had the audio surveillance in her home?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that the purpose of this audio surveillance was to try to catch my client saying something that you could use against him?
That's correct.
And you indeed did have a hookup there at her house.
You mean the device there?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
How long was it there?
I think just that one actual use time, just that one day or one evening, if I recall correctly.
When was it placed in?
It would have. I couldn't tell you the actual date. It would have been placed in possibly one evening, and then actually utilized the next evening.
Do you have notes saying what equipment was put in there, when it was put in there, when it was taken out?
Yes, sir. Well, Detective Sudbury, Lieutenant Sudbury, he was the officer that handled that. I personally did not. Okay.
Are you familiar, and do you think that there are notes saying that when this was put in, what equipment was put in, and that sort of thing? And when it was taken out?
There should be a form which we had gotten permission from Miss Hutchison to do this. Exactly what the dates are or what is on it, I'm not aware of. As I said, that would be Lieutenant Sudbury handled that, so okay. I don't know.
Did you ever oversee his placing this surveillance in there?
No, sir.
And so you're just saying we'll have to ask him about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there set procedures for doing that in the West Memphis Police Department?
Other than
for documenting that?
Just what I've described to you.
Okay. this equipment, you think it costs more than audio tapes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, how long was this surveillance out there and in use? I've already asked you how long it was out there and you didn't know, but how long was it in use? Do you know that?
For several hours, and it got to a point that we just turned it off.
And isn't it true that my client was on this surveillance?
That I don't know. I could not say. I don't know.
Did you all transcribe this?
It was impossible to do that.
Okay. Do you normally transcribe statements?
If they're audible and understandable.
Was do you often work with other police departments in investigation of crimes?
Yes, sir.
In this particular investigation, did you work with the Marion Police Department?
Later on in it, yes, sir.
Later on in it?
Yes, sir.
Do you know a man named Don Bray?
Yes, sir.
Where does he work?
Marion Police Department.
Okay. Did Don Bray provide you notes in his part of the investigation?
He provided a couple of tapes which we have transcribed and given to you.
Did he provide you any handwritten notes?
I don't recall any handwritten notes, no, sir.
Okay. Now, finally, officer, there has been a knife that has been marked for identification purposes. And what number that? E6. First of all, this evidence up here, what happens with it at night?
What's happened with it for the last 10 months?
No, since we started the trial, what happens with this evidence?
We keep it locked in vehicles.
Locked in vehicles?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when the jury goes home and we go home? And who takes the evidence and locks it up?
Myself, Detective Sergeant Allen, Detective Ridge. We use a two-wheeler over there, and we make 2 to 3 trips every morning and every afternoon, taking this evidence in and out, putting it in a van owned by the police department.
Okay.
E6.
Would you have any idea where, in these boxes, where Exhibit E6 might be?
No, sir. Y'all have been through them more than I have recently. You probably ought to know where it's at.
I've looked in here once. this particular exhibit marked as E6. Are you familiar with that exhibit?
Yes, sir, I'm familiar with it.
And in fact, you had the exhibit under earlier testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you opened the exhibit under earlier testimony.
Yes, sir.
And you also mentioned a red fiber that was in the hinge of the knife at that time. Is that correct?
No, sir, I didn't.
You acknowledged it was there, did you not?
A red fiber? No, sir.
You did not?
You better check your log. I don't think so. No, sir.
We'll ask that the
okay.
That the court
no red fiber.
Play that back later.
All right.
But this particular knife has been in the possession of the West Memphis Police Department. Is that correct?
That's right.
And you all take it home at night?
Right.
Were you aware of Dr. Peretti's testimony regarding a red fiber being in the hinge of that knife?
Sir, I've been in a witness room. I'm unable to listen to testimony.
Okay. Now, if I told you that Dr. Peretti looked in the hinge of the knife and saw a red fiber, would you agree that there was a red fiber in there?
Not unless I saw it, no, sir.
Did you ever see a red fiber in that knife?
Before I sent it off?
Before you sent it off?
No, sir.
Where did you send it?
I sent it to genetic design.
To genetic design? And is that where this Mr. Guglielmo that testified?
Yes, sir.
And when you all sent the knife to genetic design and paid them the $7,300 or whatever it was, did you ask for any testing on anything that may be in the hinge of that knife?
Right.
And did you receive any reports regarding a red fiber in that knife?
I don't recall a red fiber. No, sir. I did not see a red fiber in that knife when I sent it. When it was returned, there was a red fiber.
When it was returned, there was a red fiber. Did you ever send that red fiber off for testing?
Sir, when you send a knife off to a lab and there's no red fiber on it and they do testing, there's an assumption on my part they clean that knife afterwards.
Okay, so
now that is a cleaning rag that was evidently by Mr. Guglielmo.
Okay, to answer my question, did you ever inquire of him regarding this red fiber?
Sir, that red fiber was not on it when I sent it.
Did you ever inquire of Mr. Guglielmo regarding the red fiber?
No, sir, I did not. But I know.
Did you ever inquire to Dr. Peretti regarding the red fiber?
Me personally, no, sir.
Did you ever inquire of Lisa Sakaviges regarding the red fiber?
You're talking about a red fiber that was on this?
That knife, yes.
Well, how can I when there was no red fiber on it when I sent it?
When you sent it to genetic design,
there was no red fiber.
And where did it go from genetic design?
It went to the crime lab.
And was it ever tested at the crime lab for fibers, to your knowledge?
It would be a part of the record and file. I do not know.
Did you ever request it to be tested?
I requested for the substance that I saw on the knife.
And isn't it true that your submission sheet said to genetic design said check for blood and other substance?
Sure. That's a common terminology.
Okay. Now, to your knowledge, that knife has never been tested for fibers, has it?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Now, this particular knife, how did you come in possession of this knife?
I came in possession through Federal Express.
And where did it come from?
It came from the gentleman sitting there that are doing the HBO recording from Creative Thinking.
And to your knowledge, where did they get the knife?
They received, one of their camera personnel received it from Mr. Mark Byers.
And this particular knife that you received, did you question Mark Byers regarding this knife?
Yes, sir, I did.
And when was that questioning?
It was the 26th or 27th of, I believe, January. I'd have to refer to my notes, while we were in Corning during the Miss Kelly trial.
And did you send that knife off for blood testing?
Yes, well, to see what was on the knife, and if anything's found on the knife, to try to determine what it is.
Was there blood on the knife?
Sir, I am not a lab technician. I do not know.
Okay. Did you question Mr. Byers regarding the blood on the knife?
Yes, sir, I did.
Your Honor, we would seek to introduce the knife at this point.
I don't need to.
Now, view display it before the jury, Your Honor. Have you all been doing it with or without the package?
I don't know.
Does it matter?
Doesn't to me.
Yeah.
You might ought to do it with the packaging so you'll have the initials on the officers, because later this is going to come up and you're going to get confused again.
I'll keep it all together. I think that's a good idea. Also, just so we know, it has the Federal Express package in here also, is that correct? That's where it went to Dr. Peretti.
I didn't send that, no, sir.
Shows from, could you tell us what it shows?
This has got the address of Genetic Design, Greensboro, North Carolina. Shipping date the 18th of January of 94 to Dr. Peretti of the Arkansas State Crime Lab.
One moment if I could. Inspector Gitchell, I want to go back to one area that we discussed, and that was the area of the photo lineup that you showed the child. Now, I believe your testimony earlier was that the child mentioned something about blackface. Is that correct?
Right.
Now, isn't it true that you showed him the photo lineup prior to any of that being mentioned?
I don't recall that.
Okay. I'd like to show you a statement. And on page 4,
Which one is that, Doctor?
no idea. May 27th. Prior to the time you showed the photo lineup, Had there been another lineup shown to this child as far as you know?
One lineup.
One lineup?
Right.
So did someone else show this child any pictures prior to the time you talked with him?
Possible, I do not know.
And would Don Bray have done that prior to the time that this child was talked to?
You would have to ask Don Bray, I do not know.
Do not know. Excuse me. Just a minute. When you had the surveillance made at Vicki Hutchison's, did you ever send those tapes off for voice identification?
No, sir.
Can that be done where you send tapes off to kind of clean up the tape and to identify those voices?
Possibly it can be. I do not know.
You all do that in drug cases?
I don't think we have.
You don't think you have?
I don't know.
But that can be done, to send it to a laboratory to clean those tapes up and take out the background?
I understand that can be done on some cases.
Did you all do that in this case?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, could you find the permission slip where Vicki Hutchison signed a permission slip allowing that to be put in here?
Could I find it?
Allowing the surveillance to be put in her home?
You want me to try to
so
find
we'll know
it?
the date that this was...
Do you want me to try to find it?
Yes.
Mr. Davis, are you getting somewhere with something that's relevant?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're going to assure me of that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Judge, can we approach the bench?
Yes.
Judge, at this time we object to the court's last statement. That was a comment on the evidence. That was not in response to... Yes, I did. Yes. At this point, Judge, we object to the court's last statement. That it was a comment on the evidence by Your Honor asking if this was relevant. We call for mistrial. That was certainly not in response to any objection raised by either party. And we object to the court's last statement.
Your Honor, I want to respond before you do. Your Honor, we've objected the whole time to all of this line of inquiry, and we did not object specifically at this time. I'm talking about them basically.
If you had ever vocalized an objection as to police procedures and all that, I would have sustained it.
We did
it's
it
not relevant.
Well, Your Honor, we've done it.
What was done in this case?
We've done it
relevant.
We've done it previously in this case, and they basically said, well, I don't know what they're going to ask, and so you allow them to do it, and we don't want to object every time they go into this stuff.
If I could respond, Judge, we have objected in this case about losing evidence, about photograph lineups not done properly and not done records, about surveillance that we've never seen the documentation on the surveillance, and I think it certainly is relevant to this particular case.
You know, these
it's not. None of that is relevant now. I mean, I guess you can create some kind of image for the jury if that's what you're saying that you're entitled to do. That's another thing. I mean, your theory of the case, but whether or not it's relevant, credible evidence is. None of this line of questioning of Gitchell, except maybe a few minor points, has even been relevant at all. But they haven't objected.
If they show a witness my client's picture that he doesn't identify, the court's saying that that's not relevant.
Well, if the witness testified...
But the witnesses aren't testifying to anything, and from what we know of the statement of those witnesses, they couldn't identify a living soul. In fact, there are statements where they couldn't identify anyone, period.
Now,
so there's no relevancy to it.
If we put Aaron Hutchison on the stand, I could understand. But Your Honor, we ought to be able to put Aaron's statements on about him identifying these three guys. You could put him on the stand. But we chose not to. And so y'all should, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous to me to attack the credibility of a witness who hadn't testified.
Well, your motion's denied. And if you object in relevancy in the future, I'm sure we're going to sustain
Your
it.
Honor, right now we're objecting to a continuation along this line.
Slip.
No, sir, I haven't found it. It exists, but I haven't found it.
Nothing further. Will you find that for us?
I'll sure try. You've got my curiosity now.
Thank you.
Inspector Gitchell, this surveillance that he asked you about at Vicki Hutchison's, was this after May the 10th when Detective Ridge talked to the defendant?
I couldn't tell you exactly what date it was. I'd have to.
Well, do you know when the police department first had contact with Vicki Hutchison?
Several weeks after from the day the crime occurred.
All right, several weeks after the murders?
Yes, sir.
All right. And Damien Echols was last talked to by the police on May the 10th? All right. So isn't it true that it would have been after May the 10th when the surveillance was done?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that it was impossible to transcribe this tape from the surveillance. What do you mean by that?
You just couldn't understand it. The quality was of such, the noise, the music in the background, you just couldn't understand any of the voices.
Now, in regard to your this knife and this knife right here and questioning Mr. Byers, when something is brought to your attention that may or may not have some relevance to the case, isn't it your duty to, as a police officer, to investigate and run down every possible lead?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. And that's, you run that down whether, no matter what your personal feelings are about it.
Right.
Mr. Byers?
Yes, sir, he did.
I don't have any further questions.
Did you, in this case, run down every possible lead?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Baldwin, you said.
As far as it's aware to us.
Thank you. Nothing further.
You may stand down and call your next witness.